Naruto's world building is pretty good. The show has done a pretty good job explaining the general world and the abilities that each character has. Even the power system is something pretty easy to understand. Everyone who's familiar with the franchise would know the 5 elements that make up most of ninjutsu in Naruto's power system. However, notably, this doesn't account for a lot of techniques in Naruto. The expansion techniques, the shadow techniques, genjutsu, medical jutsu. These specific jutsus never truly fall under a specific element, and they are all rather prevalent jutsus throughout the story. That's because there exist 2 other natures in Naruto that exist outside the 5 elemental ones, Yin release and Yang release. Despite my former praise, this series has not done a good job explaining Yin release and Yang release. In fact, as far as I'm aware, these 2 chakra natures have only been explained twice throughout the entire Naruto story spanning its many chapters. Once when Naruto asks about it during his wind style training, and again during the Mizukage battle in the war arc. However, we can be pretty certain that they are the basis of all non-elemental jutsu in Naruto. Today's video is going to be spent figuring out every official non-filler jutsu in part 1 of Naruto, specifically the ones that do not fall under the main elements. Of course, before we can even do a video of this nature, we need to figure out what these nature transformations are. Thankfully, we've at least been given definitions and examples to figure out what they might be able to do. Yin release is stated to be a nature that uses spiritual energy to give imagination form. Essentially, users of Yin release can take things that don't have form and give form to them, or alternatively, bring their imagination into reality. The Nara Clan shadow jutsus are all considered Yin release techniques. Yang release, on the other hand, is nature that uses physical energy to control life energy and give form to those that have none. Essentially, you can augment your body or create new life where there wasn't any. The Akamaru clan's expansion techniques are all confirmed to be Yang release. Other than the convenience that the 2 brother-in-arm clans completely parallel each other in this way, we can try to use this as a basis to properly interpret the definitions given for Yin release and Yang release. All the shadow possession techniques revolve around weaponizing shadows and using the shadow for mid-range combat. The extent of the shadow possession goes as far as even giving them tangibility, allowing it to emerge out of the ground via techniques like the shadow strangle jutsu and the shadow stitching jutsu. All techniques that turn an intangible shadow into a tangible threat. That gives us a good idea by the statement giving form to things that don't have it. A shadow is nothing. It doesn't have form or nature. Yin release is able to take that shadow and give it form. On top of that, all genjutsu stated to be Yin release. This really gives clarification on the statement turning imagination into reality. Yin release can't conjure anything at once, at least not entirely. It is either a method to take what doesn't have form and give it form, or it creates an illusion of a form against other shinobi. Onto the Akamaru clan, the expansion techniques all revolve around augmenting your body's size as well as your strength to great heights. This is probably where the interpretation of manipulating physical energy comes in. You can physically manipulate your body to morph the way you want it to. Unfortunately, the Akamaru clan's techniques is the only place that has been confirmed to be a use of Yang release. Initially, I was going to use this as a way to land on medical ninjutsu being Yang release. However, it turns out every instance of the Akamaru clan being able to self-heal using their techniques is game specific and has never appeared in the manga. That being said, with the small baseline we were able to establish here, let's use this to figure out every ability in the franchise in order what they appeared. Appearing in chapter 1 of the manga, this jutsu makes you take the form of anything you wish. This is automatically not easy, as you can make an argument for this technique being either nature transformations. Could it be Yin release, where the user creates an illusion of the desired form, or is it a form of Yang release, where the user physically augments the very look of their body to appear like something else? Both theories make sense, so let's look at more information. For one thing, if transformation jutsu is done by Yin release, then it's an illusion. However, at no point in the series is the transformation technique treated like an illusion. For example, Naruto himself has used the varying changes that you take in transformation jutsu multiple times in battle, the most popular example being turning into a demon wind shuriken to trick Zabuza into freeing Kakashi. Now of course, one can argue that since Zabuza wasn't hit by the attack, it doesn't prove anything. But if this was an illusion, Naruto would have to be somehow levitating in the air to pull off the effects that the shuriken is pulling off. Furthermore, Shippuden Naruto uses transformation jutsu to create giant shurikens to throw against his opponents. In fact, the biggest proof was the combination transformation that Naruto used in chapter 135 to turn Gamabunta into the Ninetales. This was something Naruto expressly did to give Gamabunta claws to be able to grip onto the One Tail. This means that the claws have to be tangible and that it cannot be an illusion. Since Combination Transform is a variation of the existing transformation technique, this most likely means that the Transformation Jutsu and all its derivatives are a form of Yang release. This jutsu also originates from Chapter 1. Even though Clone Jutsu and its derived technique Haze Clone Jutsu are intangible and therefore not real, it's still not clear whether it's Yin release or Yang release because of the other clone variations that exist. You would think it falls under Yin release due to it being intangible. However, the other clone versions are tangible. Not to mention, both the intangible and tangible variants of the clones have autonomy. So what actually is taking place here? I have a theory. I actually think that what's going on here is that Clone Jutsu and the Haze derivative are not the same jutsu as the tangible clone variations that exist. It's a bit to think about, but Naruto couldn't do the clone jutsu no matter how hard he trained. We learned through Hinata's flashback in the Pain arc that Naruto has been training this technique ever since he was a little kid. How come the basic clone jutsu he could never master, but the multi-shadow clone technique Naruto could not only master, he did so in the span of an afternoon training session. Looking at the data books, you see that Naruto is someone who has a strong leniency to Yang Chakra, meaning his body will have an easier time using Yang-based jutsu than Yin-based jutsu. This points to the Shadow Clone and Regular Clone being two completely different techniques, and that not only is the clone technique and Haze clone technique an attribute of Yin release, but that Naruto's signature Shadow Clone is an attribute of Yang release. Of course, this gets confusing too. How is Shadow Clone Jutsu a form of Yang release? Yes, the form has complete autonomy, replicating Naruto's entire personality and is tangible, but for the clone to exist, it had to have had a form. But Naruto is creating a clone out of basically nothing. Is Shadow Clone Jutsu using Yin release to some extent? Is it a clone jutsu supplied with Yang Chakra to make it autonomous? I don't think so. For one thing, this would fall under Yin Yang release, which is not possible by any character in Naruto as far as the series has shown it. I think the answer is in the name itself, Shadow Clone Jutsu. When you consider the name of the technique, especially its alternate translation, the art of me and my shadow, it implies that Naruto is actually using shadows as a medium to create the clones. This would go in line with the other clone jutsus, namely Zabuza's water clone and Kakashi's lightning clone. These two techniques take an existing element and breathes life into it by Yang release and gives it form. Naruto could be doing the same thing but just with a shadow instead. This would quickly solidify itself as a pure Yang-based technique. Chapter 5 would introduce us to the Substitution Jutsu and its parent's technique, the Body Flicker. Body Flicker is a technique where the user augments their physical speed to such a strong height, they move as if they were teleporting. In fact, one of the other names of the Body Flicker technique is the Teleportation Jutsu, which is cause for a lot of confusion for Naruto fans. This is probably the most direct of all the techniques. Body Flicker has to blatantly be Yang release. When the Akamichi clan shows that strength augmentation can be done with Yang release, it's easy to infer that speed augmentation can be done with Yang release too. It's Occam's razor. The most obvious answer is the right one. However, Substitution Jutsu is a tad different, as the substitution only ever appears after the substituted piece has been hit. Now at first I was under the impression that Yang release was still at play here, with transformation being done on the substituted object to mimic the appearance of the user. However, the data books mention that it's not a transformation jutsu. In fact, it's an optical illusion, aka it only appears like that, meaning this is Yin release, casting an illusion onto the log or object to look like the user. So while Body Flicker uses Yang release, Substitution probably has Yang release and Yin release cooperate to pull off its effect. Kekkei Genkai in the franchise has always been explained as a genetic advantage. That means that the idea of a Yin Kekkei Genkai and a Yang Kekkei Genkai can always exist. The Uchiha clan are noted for being blessed with Yin release, hence their strong Genjutsu. However, another thing to consider is the second Hokage's explanation on how the Sharingan forms. Tobirama explains that a special kind of chakra emerges from Uchiha when they feel strong enough pain and anguish. This chakra is what awakens the Sharingan. It can be possible that this awakening is done through yin release. While one can make the argument that it's yang release since it's augmentation of the physical body, considering the Sharingan's capabilities are always yin-based abilities, I'm inclined to think that the enhancement is done through yin chakra. The Sharingan can cast genjutsus, copy moves, completely read and analyze jutsu, see chakra. These extra abilities are all tied to yin release, and as a result, probably are yin release techniques. So whether you want to consider the Sharingan a yin kekkei or a yin yang kekkei is up to you. But personally for me, I think it's a yin kekkei. Even the Mangekyo and Susanoo should fall under yin release too. Since the Uchiha are technically the pinnacle of yin release, the abilities that the Mangekyo users can get can only be described as possible through imagination. Amaterasu are flames that destroy everything. Kagatsuchi controls those flames. Tsukuyomi is a genjutsu world that has complete control of time. Kuroumatsukami is a genjutsu that perfectly controls the mind. Kamui literally manifests a whole other dimension for its technique. All of these things are imagination being brought to reality. Uchiha's incredibly evolved techniques have to be yin release. The tree climbing exercise in chapter 17 may not fall under yin release or yang release, as it is mostly just stated to be raw chakra at work. However, Sasuke has an internal monologue during his training for the chakra. He said that there's a difficulty building up the chakra around your foot, as too much chakra would put too much force into the tree, and too little chakra and you don't stick to the wall at all. For Sasuke's feat to be able to kick into wood and break the bark of that wood means the chakra had to have been enhancing his strength, aka this technique could actually be another yang release application. The puppet jutsu is an interesting one. I am honestly inclined to say that it's neither. The puppets aren't alive. Chakra threads are being connected to specific points of the puppet to provide movement. This implies that this technique is more likely just pure chakra control. However, it could be yin release. For Kankuro to be able to actually puppeteer an entire puppet, he should be having an insane amount of chakra threads to move an entire human puppet. If only a handful of chakra threads were enough for Kankuro to be able to use every puppet he has, implies to me that it might be yin release. But admittedly, this is an ambiguous one. Let's talk about Taijutsu. Chapter 37 introduces us to the primary lotus, Lee's 8th gate technique. Even though Taijutsu technically does not fall under any kind of nature transformation, there are techniques to Taijutsu that can very reliably fall under nature transformation. It is very easy to argue that all Taijutsu users and Kenjutsu users even use yang release to some extent. Now of course, primary lotus is in the same situation as the puppet jutsus, where we can't exactly tell if it's just raw chakra or overwhelming yang release. I am one to say yang release, that being said. Since all strength and speed capabilities can be attributed to this nature element, you can very much tie all of Lee's abilities, even the very aspect of opening the gates, as yang-based entirely. Sound in Jutsu gets introduced to us in chapter 40. Once again, due to not having the elements, this most likely falls under one of the two natures. However, in a similar case to the transformation jutsu, it's hard to gauge which one. Sound jutsu isn't exactly formless, so it could be yin release, but the techniques do all revolve around amplifying sound to use in combat, which could fall under yang release. I'm figuring that it's yin release. Controlling non-elements seems to always be attributed to yin release techniques in this franchise. Since yin release is used to control shadows, you can make the argument that controlling things that aren't elements can be attributed to yin release, which makes me believe that yin release is used to control sound. Yeah, Orochimaru gets his own section. For those of you who don't know, Orochimaru is a snake. There's a lot of snake. He creates snakes, he turns into a snake, fuse himself into a tree. He can extend his neck outward. It seems pretty likely that Orochimaru's entire combat system is yang release based. As we've seen in the franchise so far, the ability to change the very shape of your body is attributed to yang release, and the ability to create things and make them come to life is also an aspect of yang release. So Orochimaru being able to make snakes that fight and become a snake are all probably Yang release techniques, but the body stealing jutsu he does for the Chunin exam and the immortality jutsu he tries to do on Sasuke is a little bit harder to gauge. Now, body stealing technique could be Yang release. Something that Anko mentioned about the people Orochimaru killed and took the forms of for the Forest of Death was that the faces of the victims were completely gone, which means you can make the argument that Orochimaru was forcibly using Yang release onto his opponents to change how they look and then absorb that into his body, which implies that the body stealing technique is most likely Yang release. And the immortality jutsu he ends up using in the retrieval arc is probably Yin released, which is also explained through Shippuden. In Shippuden, Sasuke was able to completely reverse the immortality technique and steal Orochimaru's body instead of the other way around. And the reason that Sasuke was able to pull it off was by using his Sharingan. Since the Sharingan has the ability to use Genjutsu against your own opponents, this implies that this world is at minimum a Yin-based world. So for me, the body stealing technique is probably Yang release, while the immortality technique is probably Yin release. Summoning Jutsu is a subset of a much bigger branch of techniques known as Fuin Jutsu, or sealing techniques. Stuff like the Reaper Death Seal, Summoning Jutsu, the Curse Mark Seal are of the same classification of Jutsu. That being said, I do believe that Fuin Jutsu is a form of Yin release. And the only reason that I can say that is Yin release is that there's no feasible explanation of how it could be Yang release. No physical body is being augmented, no life is being made, nothing is being changed. It is a little bit strange though. With Naruto being considered really bad at Yin release, it's hard to explain how he is able to do the summoning jutsu if that's a Yin release technique. But you could make the argument that the clone technique is just a much harder stipulation than using the summoning technique. The Yamanaka clan jutsu that appears in chapter 5 is a similar case to the transformation jutsu. I don't actually know if it's Yin release or Yang release. It could be Yin release since it's projecting your mind. Your mind isn't really a physical thing, more of a concept, but at the same time, it could be Yang release since you're literally transferring your life into another body. If the technique was something like replicating your mind and sending it forward, I would honestly be inclined to say this was Yin release because that would very much just be imagination turned reality. But since Ino literally goes unconscious every time the technique is used, implies to me that this might actually be a Yang release technique. The Curse Mark is Senjutsu, isn't either. The Chakra stealing technique is a jutsu that appears in chapter 66. It's the technique that's used against Sasuke in the preliminary fights of the Chunin exam. For me, this is probably falling under Yang release. Since Yang release is stated to be able to give life to those that don't have it, there is no argument to say that it can't take life from those that do have it. Since Yang release is the basis for all jutsu that has anything to do with life, this could most likely be a Yang release technique. Even though the Aburame Clan's bug techniques are technically non-elemental jutsu, this is actually a situation where I can confidently say it does not fall under either. The bugs are the ones doing the work. There's no real application of Yin release or Yang release. The only thing in the Aburame Clan that I can probably say might have some nature of transformation to it is the very body of the Aburame Clan. In the Chunin exams, Neji mentions that Shino's body is basically hollow, so an argument could be made that Yang release was done to allow that structure, although it could also be that somebody hollowed out his body, so a technique of the Inazuka clan, where the user gains dog-like tricks. This is very directly Yang release. Even though I said that I'm fairly certain that all ocular jutsu fall under Yin Kekkei Genkai, I'm actually kind of certain that Byakugan is Yang Kekkei Genkai. Gentle Fist is a Taijutsu, which means that it's definitely Yang release based, and using pinpoint chakra precision to affect opponents' chakra networks pretty neatly fits the requirement of Yang release. However, an ocular jutsu that can see chakra networks that gives you 360-degree vision, predict movement due to seeing how the muscles move, implies that it's a form of Yang release that's enhancing the eyes to such an extent that it gives it that 360-degree X-ray vision and cognitive abilities as a result. So I think the Byakugan pretty confidently falls under Yang release. Everyone probably forgot this jutsu, but this was used in chapter 89. Kabuto uses this technique to escape from Kakashi when Kakashi catches him killing Anbu. This falls under a gray area for me, since it technically is Yin release, since it is turning things to reality. It is also the transference of vitality. Since I'm willing to put something like Mind Transfer Jutsu as a Yang-based technique, I think the ability to literally possess a different dead body. Alright, quick speed round. Edo Tensei is summoning jutsu and therefore Yin release. Reaper Death Seal is Fu and jutsu and therefore Yin release. Toad Mouth Bind is also summoning and therefore Yin release. Rasengan is not a technique that falls under either, since the only description of the Rasengan is that it's chakra control at its absolute maximum. Tsunade gets her own section because explaining one of her techniques means getting into her whole kit. I have reason to believe that that's similar to Orochimaru. Tsunade's entire battle style revolves around using Yang release. However, unlike Orochimaru, I think it's only Yang release. Tsunade plays two roles as a combatant, a healer and a giant fucking cannon. So let's talk about the biggest reason why nobody has figured out whether medical jutsu falls under Yin release and Yang release. The Byakugan seal, the diamond on Tsunade's forehead. Why is this such a point of confusion for everyone? Simple, because it's also called the Yin seal. This has caused a lot of confusion in the community, as people thought that this implied that feeling jutsu falls under Yin release. I don't think so. I don't even remotely think that's what the implication was supposed to be. As I stated before, sealing techniques fall under Yin release. And also keep in mind, this means that to me, that the name Yin seal is really indicative of the seal itself being Yin release, and that the purpose of the sealing jutsu is just to store as much chakra in it as it possibly can until Tsunade needs to use it later. Not to mention, with Tsunade being a senju, it further amplifies the fact that healing jutsu has to be Yang release, as the Uchiha are mentioned to be insanely gifted in Yin release, the senju are stated to be insanely gifted in Yang release. This is even more attributed to Hashirama, who stated to have such an insane affinity to Yang release that he had a healing factor. I always found this really cool. Tsunade's whole kit is the absolute peak of what Yang release should be capable of, aside from the weird stuff that Orochimaru does. And what I love so much about it is how it parallels Hashirama's own Yang release, who had incredible regeneration and incredible strength. I really like it when characters try to find ways to use techniques of their predecessors, even if it's in unique ways like the way Tsunade is doing. Kinda makes me wish Kakashi learned how to do Flying Raijin. Needle Jizo is Jiraiya's technique used in chapter 166. It's a technique that has him use his hair and turn it into spiky tendrils. A technique like this definitely falls under Yang release, strictly due to the simple use of changing the properties of his physical form. This is Shizune's technique in the same chapter. It's a technique where Shizune breathes out poison that is stated to be so poisonous that even the slightest breath of it would kill someone. This might be Yin release since she's creating poison out of nowhere. This might be Yang release since she could be augmenting the breath in her mouth. I'm inclined to say Yin release. Equally, she could just be storing a lot of poison in her lungs. I'm putting these specific sound 4 ninja in one place, as they are what I like to call Yang Kekkei Genkai. These are people who have genetic mutations that affects how their body physically behaves, from Kidomaru's extra arms, Yukon Sakon's extra body, Kimimaro's bone manipulation. It's very safe to say that it's Kekkei Genkai based in Yang release. Honestly, that rounds up all the abilities that appear in part 1. I did ignore wood release, that's mostly because it gains much more relevance in part 2. This is what I believe to be all the Yin release and Yang release based abilities that appeared in part 1. If you guys want me to make a follow-up talking about the techniques that appear in part 2, let me know in the comments. And also let me know if I've missed any techniques that could honestly fall under one or the two. Maybe you guys can introduce me a different logic on how any of the techniques I did mention did fall under somewhere else.